Government has pushed back the deadline for the start of layoffs in the public sector from this Wednesday to the end of this month. Confirmation of this from Prime Minister Sandals to reporters following talks this afternoon at government headquarters with the major public sector unions. Those talks lasted for just under 3 hours, after which Mr. Stewart announced the retrenchment date is being pushed back. He says this is to allow the Civil Service Ministry to generate a list of names for the layoffs and for the unions to have an input into that process. The BWU's case at the talks was put by General Secretary Sir Roy Trotman, while NUPW General Secretary Dennis Clark argued the case for that union. Finance Minister Chris Sinclair and Minister of Labour Dr. Esther Bayos-Suku were also present at the discussions. Government has said it must cut 3,000 public sector jobs to help turn around Barbados' economy, and the Prime Minister reiterated that no two breadwinners from the same household will be laid off.
We had set the 15th of January for the taking of the first bit of action. That date must now be vacated because of the challenges posed to the Ministry of the Civil Service in even generating the list to be affected. But we are certain now that by the end of this month, we should be able to deal with those issues definitively and finally. And of course, between now and the end of the month, the unions will have an opportunity for their input on those issues.
Prime Minister Stewart says a humane approach will be taken in preparing the list.
When that list becomes available, then we'll be in a position to know what the exact fallout will be. But whatever the exact fallout is going to be, the budgetary targets cannot be compromised. Having said that, I should also make the point that the budgetary targets cannot yield ground to, or we cannot allow our humanity to yield ground to the pursuit of budgetary targets.
BWU General Secretary Sir Roy Trotman says they are fully aware of the problems facing the economy and that unions are now better able to have an input into the process now that the January 15th deadline has been revised.
We see today's meeting as part of ongoing talks. The question as to whether the talks will continue at the level of the Prime Minister or at the level of the Minister, or whether it will go back to the permanent secretaries of various ministries, that is a matter which will be determined when once the government does some things that we have asked the government to do, and the various unions have had the opportunity to look at those things.
Government is not considering introducing any user fees at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital at this time. This assurance from Minister of Health John Boyce. We hear more in this report from Kishmar Sanjis.
Health Minister John Boyce has poured cold water on the idea of user fees at the QEH. He is suggesting it will not result in a significant increase in revenue for the hospital. His comments came at a DLP Christchurch South Branch meeting last evening at the St. Lawrence Primary School.
Government has stayed away from implementing any user fees at this time. And as we continue to roll out our healthcare financing program, we look at the entire question. The point must be made that the Democratic Labour Party in government has signed on to the maxim of universal health care for all. And we believe that this is something which we have got to be able to ensure Barbadians.
Fees, however, for private patients at the QEH are to increase.
And this increase will require certain parliamentary action on this because fees are set by the regulations are set by negative resolution in the House of Assembly. So that will be dealt with over time. And this will be an attempt again to introduce some levels of revenue.
Minister Boyce expects revenue at the hospitals be further boosted with the rollout of its ophthalmology and cardiology services targeting neighboring islands. Guest Speaker Minister of Industry Donald Innes is optimistic Barbados will overcome the current challenges. He has told Barbadians that the Democratic Labour Party will continue to address the problems confronting the island.
If you did not have men and women of the intestinal fortitude that we have now in the political directorate of Barbados, this country would have crumbled and we would be much worse off as a society. So as politicians, as ministers, as a government, we would take our licks. But let me say in defense that we decided to stand up, not to run away from the challenges, and to wrap our arms around this economy and society and protect our people.
Mr. Innes wants Barbados to remain focused on the way forward. Kishmar Sanjis, CBC News.
Thanks, Kishmar. Well, the opposition leader says government's projects to jumpstart the economy will not yield the benefits in the time needed to move the country forward. And she wants the government to stop playing footsie with the people of Barbados. Ms. Motley was addressing the inaugural People's Assembly at the Frederick Smith Secondary School last night. She rubbished the proposals put forward by Finance Minister Chris Sinclair and said Barbados will not grow unless both he and Prime Minister Sandals Stewart go. Ms. Motley said the measures outlined by the Finance Minister are too late.
How Ammon Ralph Sandals to help the Barbados economy now? It takes 2 to 3 years to build up the hotel. It takes 2 years for a cruise pier to build. It takes 2 years if the sign releases. It takes time, Jerome, for a sugar factory that you still don't know that you need. And you'll take up $500 million that you don't have to build. This is all smoke and mirrors. And the only thing that is holding them is the consent and the silence of the people of Barbados.
In a near hour-long address, Ms. Motley said the question still remains regarding how the government will finance the deficit after sending home people. Meantime, Edmund Hinkson, in whose St. James North constituency the meeting was held, made some suggestions on how to move the economy forward.
Lowering the energy costs, which can be done immediately by placing a subsidy on energy, can stimulate the economy. We have the view that we can create science parks, that we can create townships for the University of the West Indies rather than cut the University of the West Indies budget.
The assemblies move on to their foundation school in Christchurch tomorrow night. A senior Antiguan official believes the Sandals hotel chains offers one of the best investment opportunities for Barbados and other Caribbean countries. Minister of Finance and Economic Affairs Harold Lovell says offering concessions to such businesses should be encouraged. He was speaking to Barbadian journalists during a tour of Sandals properties in the Eastern Caribbean.
Mr. Lovell says Sandals has been good for his country. He points out that these gains have come in the form of a destination presence in source markets, branding and marketing. He notes that attracting investment to the region has not been easy, but it is something that needs to be done to get economies back on track. Mr. Lovell says though many may scoff at providing concessions, they are necessary.
We have high energy prices. That's a disincentive for many of our islands at present. We have generally high labor costs relative to many other parts in the world. And therefore you must do whatever you have to do in order to get the result, and that's my position. I don't think it's something that I know some people are uncomfortable about it, but you know, when you sit in the hot seat and you have school leavers who need employment, you have construction workers who are at home and are unable to maintain their families, when you have people's cars and homes being repossessed because they're not working, then it's important to turn the wheel.
He says although he's heard the concerns raised about the Sandals operation in Barbados, it is something his own government has done. Antigua has introduced sunset legislation which allows for generous concessions on a sliding scale. In other words, the more you invest, the more you get. The country has even gone a step further with the formation of the Antigua and Barbuda Investments Authority.
We recently entered a memorandum of agreement with the Sandals Group. We're expecting that later this year they will begin construction on the Beaches Hotel out on the eastern side of Antigua, Long Bay. And in order to attract this investment, we were prepared to offer very generous concessions. And we are familiar with what happened in Barbados, we are familiar with what happened in Grenada, and my understanding is that St. Lucia is also moving in the same direction.
Mr. Lovell believes the Sandals brand will bring several benefits to Barbados. In Antigua, for example, the company employs more than 1,000 at its resort and also generates revenue for ancillary providers like farmers, taxi drivers, tour operators and other small cottage industry providers. Michelle Arthur, CBC News.
Thanks, Michelle. In other news now, we hear that plans for the new cruise terminal, Sugar Point, are at an advanced stage. This has been revealed by the Chief Executive Officer of the Bridgetown Port Incorporated, David Jean-Marie, as he delivered remarks during an inaugural ceremony to mark the maiden voyage of Norwegian breakaway cruise ship to Barbados yesterday. Though not giving the exact state of the project or a timeline, Mr. Jean-Marie says the facility should be completed within the next 4 years.
Sugar Point is about to be signed off, and we will hopefully have 2 to 3 new piers on a new greenfield site built about half a mile from here in about 3 to 4 years' time.
To reduce the chance of fire, householders and business owners need to regularly check their roof wiring. Speaking against the background of the recent spike in fires, Chief Fire Officer Wilfred Marshall is appealing to the public to be more vigilant and cautious. So far this year, 4 house fires have been recorded, with the homes either being extensively damaged or destroyed.
You can have electrical problems. There's a lot of wire that goes through the roof. So if it is not properly done, then you can have fire starting at the roof level. It might not be inside the roof, it could be electrical wire on the upper structure of the house.
Meanwhile, there is concern that some homeless people have been causing fires at some unoccupied houses and buildings. Chief Marshall says that neighbors need to be very alert about their surroundings to prevent fires from spreading or damaging their property.
But usually these unoccupied homes, there are people who are, let me say, they're homeless, or the people, fellas gather there for whatever safety, and they try to prepare meals in there, or just generally smoking, and they're not as safety aware as they should be.
Well, there's been an increase in the number of juniors participating in the finals of the Community Dance Fest competition this year. This is according to Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Social Care, Constituency Empowerment and Community Development, Ernesta Drakes. Her comments came today at the Community Development Department at Warrens, where organizers accepted 2 checks from sponsors of the Community Dance Fest 2014 competition. This event is slated for the Garfield Sobers Sports Complex on January 21st. Ms. Drakes says despite a drop in corporate sponsorship due to the economic downturn, the number of young people showing interest in the competition still remains at an all-time high.
This year we are recording the largest number of juniors in the competition, and consequently the largest number of juniors advanced into the finals. The juniors category comprise those groups with the majority of their members below the age of 13 years. This augurs well for the development of the competition and for dance as a vehicle used by the Community Development Department to create some measure of social change at the community level.
Brand manager for Tea Time at Wabisco, Clifford Gooden-Edgell, says Dance Fest creates an important gateway for the future development of the cultural industries at the community level.
We see this event as a very positive one for our youth to be able to showcase their talents. And as a company, we have an unwavering support in our youth. We believe in supporting any event that seeks to build out our communities, and we see this event as no different.
Residents and businesses along the south coast should have some relief tonight after water outages and low pressure today. This was due to repairs being carried out to a 16-inch burst main in Darrells Road, Christchurch. This affected residents along Highway 7 from Hastings to Oystons. Rendezvous, Marine Gardens, Balmoral Gap and the immediate surrounding areas were also affected. Water tankers were dispatched to assist those in the affected districts and will continue to do so until the problem is rectified.